G'day friends, this is Father Paul Newton, and this time I found another extraordinary individual. But first, let him introduce himself.
My name is Paul Newton as well.
What? Tell the truth, you can't lie to a priest.
We're not twins. I don't know how this came to be, but we both share that name.
How about that? It's true, I have to support him. Father Paul Newton and Paul Newton, how about that? All right. Now, how about you tell us, where are we? What is this jungle? Where have you taken
Well, this messy environment where we're seated at the moment is my studio. And I work as an artist, a visual artist, a painter. And you can see the tools of trade, the paint swatches and brushes. And
Your clothes look very clean.
Yes, that's true.
We should have got an art smock on or something.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all right.
So that's where we find ourselves today.
You spend a lot of time here then?
It's like a cell. Yeah, I often feel like I'm chained to the easel and working away. But no, it has its positives as well, of course.
Is it a hobby or is it something more?
In the very early days when I was a young child, it was only a hobby, of course, but it was a passion. Mm-hmm. And these days it remains a passion, but it also has become a livelihood, a full-time job.
All right. So you're supporting not just yourself, you have family?
Family, four kids and a wife, so it puts food on the table.
Okay.
And
do any of the kids sneak in here to try to contribute some of their own finger painting or something like that?
Well, they're usually happy to give me their impressions about how well or otherwise the painting that I'm working on might be going, and to give me their advice on how I could fix it. And actually, sometimes they're right.
I don't doubt. Now, just in case you're thinking that Paul provides paintings for the local fete, tell us some of the paintings that you've done. You've entered them in what sort of competitions?
I've been fortunate enough over the years to have been, I think it's about 10 times a finalist in the Archibald Prize. And Doug Moran, and I'm involved. I do a lot of portrait commission work in America, and they have a portrait society and other institutions like that in the States. And I've been involved with competitions that they run as well.
Okay. And is there anything in particular that you're working on now?
The biggest project probably of my career, I dare say. Hopefully there's a few more years left in that career, but it's a project commission that Cardinal George Pell from Sydney has commissioned me to paint, and it's a series of 32 paintings for the Domus Australia Chapel in Rome.
What is the Domus Australia?
Domus Australia is a pilgrim centre which Cardinal Pell it's only been open, I think, since last June or July, so fairly recently established. A place that was formerly a Marist Father's house in Rome, a stone's throw from Termini, if you know the geography of Rome at all. It's very central. And it's a place where visitors to Rome can stay. It has accommodation, dining facilities, conference facilities, a chapel, and the chapel is in fact where the paintings that I'm doing, those that I've completed and those that I'm still working on, are hanging and will hang.
Okay, so if you're visiting Rome and you're in the chapel there at Domus Australia near Termini and you're saying a prayer and you're looking around, you're being inspired, spare a thought and a prayer for this man and his family. Amen.
I need it.
Now, how about we go back, because it'd be great to find out how you got involved in painting.
It was a very roundabout route, really. I was at school as a very young child. I mentioned briefly before, as a very young child, it was my greatest pleasure and passion to draw, and I drew incessantly. And I go to bed early, which my parents at the time were very happy about, and I'd sit up in bed and I'd draw for hours on end. But then I went through the middle years of school and high school and did the usual academic kind of subjects, and didn't really have a chance to pursue art. And I didn't study art at school at all in high school. And in fact, I studied science at university post high school. And after that I worked for a while as a musician, which I loved music and loved to play. And friends of mine were musicians, so it seemed natural to move into that direction. And over a couple of glasses of red wine, I was commiserating with a friend of mine about how I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, and I was in my early 20s at the time. We both were.
I'm sure there's a few people who can relate to that. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure there would be.
Yeah.
And he said, look, you ought to consider coming to art school, because I told him I loved drawing. When I was a child, I drew a lot, and he said there's a great social life to be had. It mentioned all of these other wonderful attributes of art school life. And the final thing he said is, and you can learn to draw and paint. That was like an afterthought. Anyway, yeah, right, exactly. But I was sold, and I went along, and the first day I went, and I opened the door into the art school. This is Julian Ashton's art school in the Rocks in Sydney. And I opened the door, and I'd never had any experience prior to this of what an art school was like. I had no idea. And I walked in and I looked around and I saw a whole lot of rather eccentric looking characters who were drawing and painting from still life subjects.
Is that a prerequisite?
To being eccentric? I think it helps. I think it helps. And it was like a homecoming.
Yeah.
The smell of the gum turps in the air, the dusty still life subjects, as I mentioned, the eccentric people there. It really felt like I belonged, which belies the fact that I spent years then trying to hone my skills and work up a skill base whereby I could actually make a living out of it. But nevertheless, at that moment, I felt like years of fruitless searches had finally, I'd finally found something that was going to work for me.
Okay. Role models, inspirations, any particular events or people that really helped empower or motivate you?
The one person probably who fits that bill was the young bloke Tim, who I mentioned indirectly before, who I was having a chat with and telling him all my story of woes about how I had no idea what to do. And Tim was a student at art school. Tim was a friend of mine from school days. And he also introduced me to my now wife. So he's been quite an instrumental figure in my life, Tim. And he sadly passed away a few years ago. Okay. He had all sorts of difficulties with alcohol and other things. And he was a tortured soul, but he was one of the most artistic and gifted people I've ever come across, and a real, a wonderful guy.
Blessing for you.
A real blessing, and I do miss him, as do many of his friends.
So can you tell us how your artistic career and the work that you do has affected you personally as a man, and even spiritually? How has it enriched you?
I think it's a great... I personally find it a great privilege to be involved in not only in the work I'm doing for Domus, which of course in and of itself is a great privilege, but to be able to work as an artist, as a visual artist, doing the thing I love to do. I know so many people in life don't have that luxury of doing the thing that they love to do, so I feel very privileged to be in that position. And to work in a field where you're working with trying to depict beauty in a way. I mean, not just beauty, but it's an important factor, an important component in visual art, the aesthetic side. And really it gives you a chance to explore what that means when you're creating your own work, even a portrait or a landscape or whatever it might be that you're painting at the time. And you're struggling to make the thing come to life, to make it harmonious and work as a whole, which is the hardest thing for any artist to do, I think, to make the thing work as a whole, as a unified whole. Then really, in some ways, what you're doing is you're trying to reflect what nature has inherently and trying to inject that into your own work. And it's very much from a spiritual standpoint, the whole exercise of creating art, I find, is very much a spiritual exercise, because you're constantly reflecting on what creation has inherently and trying to capture something of that in your work. And it also brings inevitably humility, because you know that no matter how well you think you're doing, and of course you're always your own worst critic, but that aside, you know that you're never really going to capture anything like the sublime perfection of creation. But it's a constant struggle, and it's a constant conversation that you're having, not only a prayerful conversation with God about what it is that you're doing, and hoping for the inspiration to move beyond your own inabilities to particularly in the case of a work that has a spiritual basis, say some of these works for Domus Australia, where you're wanting to convey more than just a superficial likeness of an individual, but rather something deeper, the story of their life. In the case of a portrait of some saint from the past, or the Madonna and Child, you're wanting to say something about them, and you're wanting something more than just that likeness to come through the painting, for people who view the painting to encounter. And my prayer in those situations is that God will do the work through me and help me to get out of the way. And so it's a very humbling experience. And I think if you manage to reach that stage of getting out of the way sufficiently, then the best work.
Is there one painting in particular that stays with you as a real touching work and speaks to you more than others, and you've learnt from, or it's drawn you closer to the person that you've tried to capture?
Oh, of my own work, you mean?
Yeah.
When I was first asked by Cardinal Pell a few years ago, just prior to World Youth Day in Sydney in 2008, to paint a depiction of Our Lady of the Southern Cross, the Madonna, Mary and the baby Jesus, I was daunted and honoured to have been asked to do it. Daunted because it's a theme that's been painted countless times through Western European art history, and some of the greatest artists of all time have grappled with that subject, and so I felt very inadequate when it came to dealing with that same subject matter. And but nevertheless I had a go at it, and what I tried to convey, as well as I mentioned before, trying to get out of the way so that hopefully God could work through me and do what he wanted to do, the things that I was consciously trying to encapsulate in the painting were Mary being the adult and being the main figure in the painting because of her size with respect to the baby Jesus, is going to visually dominate the canvas. It's inevitable. But in trying to get inside her head, such as it might be possible to do so, I was trying to think of how would she want to be seen. And I thought, if anyone is a great exemplar of Christian sanctity, she would have to be up there on the list, if not the top of the list. And her chief quality, it seemed to me, was humility, because here she was with her divine Son, who she was bearing and presenting to the world. And so in the painting I had her not looking at the viewer, but looking down at him. So she was totally focused on him. She was, rather than, and I've got 4 kids, and I know with friends and also with my wife, seeing mothers and their young babies, it's more often than not that they'll hold the baby in toward them with a very intimate rapport that they have with their newborn baby. And I wanted that to be present in this painting, but more than that, I wanted her to be presenting him to us, the viewer. So I had him turned around facing the viewer. She's looking very intently at him and holding him very close to her. In fact, they're kind of cheek to cheek, so it's a very intimate bond that they have. But nevertheless, she's fully aware that he's there for everyone, not just for her. And she's not looking at us. She's not getting any of the limelight. It's totally focused on him. And he's the one who's looking out at us. So it's all about, to me, Mary is all about Jesus, and Jesus is looking at us in the form of this baby who has the wisdom of ages in a young, innocent face.
Marvellous. All right, here's your chance. There's a few budding artists perhaps out there who are stuck in some arts course somewhere, not knowing where life will lead them. What word could you offer to those who perhaps have been tinkering but maybe don't have the confidence to pursue painting, but would really, that's where their heart is?
It's very difficult. I know for many years I was struggling and straining to make a living, and having a family, it made that even more difficult because I had to put bread on the table. So it's never easy. And sometimes your passion and the work that you do to make a living, sometimes there's a conflict between those. If you can marry the two together, it can be wonderful. Although the downside is that you don't paint just when you want to paint. When you feel the inspiration, you paint because you've got to paint. And sometimes it's just an onerous task. But in a nutshell, my advice would be, certainly if you have a love of art or a love of anything in the creative field particularly, which is what I'm more familiar with than anything else, I'd say don't give up on it. Go for it. It won't, I don't think, in my experience at least, it won't be easy. Don't expect it to be easy. And I'm often reassured, in fact, when I see the work of some great master like Velázquez, who I think was probably the greatest painter ever. When you see his works and you see the analysis, modern day contemporary analysis that they've done using X-ray photography, and they see that Velázquez might have painted a figure and the hand started here and later it ended up here. In other words, even he made mistakes and had to rectify them. And I think, well, even if someone of his stature, of his incredible talent, didn't get it right the first time and had to constantly modify what he was doing in his paintings, and no doubt that carried over into his life as an artist more generally, then I think we mere mortals can learn from that. And therefore, if you are struggling with it, you're on track, because that's how it's going to be.
Thanks so much. Marvellous stuff. Well, you've been listening to Paul Newton, speaking with Father Paul Newton. It's been a pleasure. Every blessing.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Now you'll be able to obviously edit this to your heart's content.
That's right.
And crop it down.
Yeah. So
because the one tendency, as you may have noticed, I have is to be a little bit.
Never.
No. I just noticed we've got the same shoes on.
Gee.
That's always had my head was bowed.
There you go. We've got more than one thing in common, haven't we?
There you go.
G'day friends, this is Father Paul Newton here, and I found someone else, an extraordinary person, and I'd like to introduce you to him. But first, maybe I'll get him to introduce himself. Right, I'll say that again. I said it. All right, take one. Okay.
Take two.
Okay, take two now. G'day friends, this is... I got to...
Yeah.
But at the end, when I say any words of advice for budding artists, then I'll give you a chance to look there and give you 2 bits worth. Do your little Jimmy Swaggart or something, or your Billy Graham or something. And
right.
Come on, we need you. We need you. Come
we
down.
need you. Come on. Yeah, exactly.